Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here. Today we're going to be reviewing the 3DS. We're going to be reviewing Image of the Fendahl. Now, this was, of course, sent to me by one of my patrons, Simon, which I very much appreciate. I'd only seen Image once or twice before, and it had been a long time, so I had wanted to give it a rewatch. Forgive me, my sinuses are still acting up. Mississippi weather is, I would say, bipolar, but I do believe it's crossed into schizophrenic at this point. Episode 4 picks back up. Parts 2 and 3 were good without being great. I had really enjoyed part 1. Things pick up in part 4. I think the cast are putting in a good job. Even the kind of two guys I didn't think as much of, or a lot of it, they kind of picked up here. I like David as a character, how when he realizes his fate, that he's already looked into the eyes, he's just like, get the gun, bring me the gun. It won't hurt her. It's for me. The fact that he wasn't feared, he wasn't afraid to do that. It was a better fate than what would have happened to him otherwise. The realization of the Fendahl creature in its final form, if that was its final form, to be fair, we never actually saw it complete its gestalt form. Still isn't impressive. I've talked before about how that was always the weakest point of the story for me. It doesn't quite bother me as bad with the gold paint, and I know that Wanda enjoyed wearing the gold paint because she had also been up for the part in Goldfinger years before. The bit with the painted on eyes always bugs me. It always has. I've talked about that before. I don't like painted on eyes. In some shots, it's not as bad. In other shots, it is. It just depends on the shot. The one scene when she kind of smiles, like, is very creepy. I like that. But the Fendahl never comes across as the great baddie it's supposed to be. Maybe, again, that's because it hasn't completed itself. It's still kind of powering up. It hasn't gotten all 12 gestalts together. So remember, we never actually saw it in its final form. But it never really comes across as imposing. It's implied, but I never feel the threat of it like I do great villains like the Angels in Blink, or the Entity in Midnight, or the Rutan in Horror of Fang Rock, or Sutek in Pyramids of Mars. I never feel the threat of her. I get that they're saying it, and how dangerous it is. Like when Tom mentions, you know, there are however many billion people on this planet, a year from now, there'll be only one. Like, it's explained to me, but I never feel the threat of it. That's just not communicated as well to me throughout this episode. It's cool seeing Tom use the gun with the rock salt on the creature. It's always weird to me how in Modern Who they're like, the Doctor doesn't use guns, the Doctor doesn't use guns, except when the Doctor does use guns. I mean, the Doctor will use guns, just it has to be in a proper set of circumstances. And here he uses the gun effectively, which works and kills the one Fendahl-like creature. Because he needed to use a gun there. Tom's putting in a good performance. Him and Leela feel very weird in this one. Like, the rapport between them in this story doesn't feel like the rapport they usually have. Their friendship feels different in this. Like, they do tend to have this kind of mentor-student relationship a lot. It feels different here. He feels more like her uncle, like she's his nephew. I don't know why, but just the camaraderie they have in this story feels different. Sometimes when they banter, it doesn't feel like how he normally banters with Leela. It's like how he might banter with Sarah or something. It just feels a bit different. The conversation at the end, the actual ending of the story when they're back in the TARDIS, is really clunky. It's not so much the dialogue as the way they play it, and the way it's directed feels clunky. Like when you see K9 just nodding his head, that's really weird. And when they're having that last talk at the end, I don't know what it is, but it feels off. It feels clunky. It feels weird. And then the credits roll and it's over. I don't know why, but it just feels really, really strange. I do love the bit when Leela shoots the creature with her eyes closed. Good shot with her eyes closed. And Tom checks on her and he picks her up like, are you all right? And she's like, yeah, you know. When he realizes, all right, he just kind of drops her and goes running back. And the look on Louise Jameson's face is hilarious. She's like, it's one of those things like you almost think that it wasn't staged and that was just Tom being Tom, so he dropped her. And Louise was actually slightly annoyed and was like, and they just kept it in. Now, I know that's not true because they actually do remark on that on the making of, because I did watch the making of after I finished the story. And they actually rehearsed that, and she mentions that look on her face. So that actually was rehearsed. But I still just love the look on her face right there. Also, when she gives, I think it's Adam, a peck on the cheek, that doesn't seem like a Leela thing. Like when she's saying goodbye to him and she gives him a peck on the cheek and a smile and walks off. That seems very un-Leela to do. I mean, I don't know. Maybe she did fancy him slightly. I guess it's possible, but it just doesn't, it seems a little out of character for Leela to do that. Again, Leela feels a little different in this story. I'm trying to remember, there's a scene in particular, and I talked about it in one of the other videos, where when she's talking to the doctor, and she says something with kind of a laugh and a smile to him. And I can't remember what it was, but it felt really out of place. Leela just doesn't quite feel like Leela in this story to me. And again, the banter between her and the doctor, their friendship feels different. Not necessarily better or worse, just sideways to where it normally is. It just feels like a different type of friendship. The actual story, I really enjoy. I mean, all 4 parts. The story is good. The story on paper is really good. I love the actual story a lot. Again, Doctor Who doing horror really well. I have a feeling I would really love the novelization of this. I don't know if I have the novelization of this. I'd have to ask some of the people who've sent me novelizations, which probably means the Flyattractor, since he sent me a lot of them. I guess I really need him to tell me if he sent me that one or not. But to be honest, he'd probably be like, he probably wouldn't remember if he sent it or not either. So I'm going to have to go through my novels, which got boxed up in the move. Some of them are here. Some of them are in storage. Don't worry, my storage unit is climate controlled because Mississippi humidity is nothing to joke about in the summer. So I paid the extra money and got one inside a building. It's safe. My stuff's good. But I need to go through and look through the different boxes. They're in like 3 or 4 boxes. And see if I have the novelization of this, because I have a feeling I'd really enjoy that read. Wanda's doing a good job as the Fendahl in part 4. She's not really having to do a lot, to be honest. She doesn't really have to talk. She just has to kind of move in certain ways, but she's doing that fine. I really like the guy who played Fendelman in this. I really liked him a lot. I can't remember if he died in part 3 or part 4, but I really liked him. And I loved when he was kind of losing it there at the end, when he realized how he'd been a pawn all this time with his name. Fendelman, Fendel's mad. I love that. I love that scene. He's just good throughout the whole story. I can't get over this stuff. Yeah, this one just never quite seems to come together for me completely, though. I don't know what it is. Parts 1 and 4 I really enjoyed. Parts 2 and 3 were good, but for some reason, my overall opinion of the story still isn't as high as I feel like it should be. I don't quite know why. It just isn't. I love the story itself. And the cast, for the most part, is good. Just for some reason, it doesn't quite live up to a lot of the other Tom Baker horror stuff, like Season 13, Season 14, Horror of Fang Rock. It doesn't quite measure up. I mean, there is the odd scene when David gets the gun and it cuts away and you just hear the shot and it cuts back to him on the ground. Now, again, the making of talks about how they did that deliberately because they were already being cracked down on about the violence. And maybe that's part of the problem with the episode, is it was being managed with the, we got to tone this down. I know also Anthony Reed was taking over from Robert Holmes at this point. That could have had something to do with it. It just doesn't quite stand up to the other horror stories of this era for me. Even though as a story on paper, it does. But just the execution of it, for some reason, it's not quite as memorable to me. And more, I think Season 15 might be Tom's weakest season. It's really hard, because I love all of Tom's seasons, but I wonder if 15 would be his weakest for me. Because I love Leela. She's a great companion. She's one of my favorite companions. But you have, like, The Invasion of Time, which is kind of weak just because of the budget. Underworld, which has, much like Image of the Fendahl, Underworld has really strong bookending episodes and then kind of not as strong middle episodes. Invisible Enemy, I'm also not keen on. It's okay, but you guys know I'm not a big fan of it. It's more famous for introducing K9 than anything. And then this one's the same way. It just doesn't quite measure up, even though I feel like it should, leaving the standouts for this one really for me to be the Sunmakers and the Horror of Fang Rock, both of which I absolutely adore. So for some, this could be my least favorite Tom season when I think about it. I don't know quite why. There's no necessarily bad stories in it, but some of them just don't measure up to the Tom Baker era, let us say. So that's kind of just where I fall on it. I want to know what you think of the Image of the Fendahl, so comment down below and letting me know. Also, if you would like to send anything to me, my P.O. box is down there as well, as is a link to my Patreon if you'd like to support me on that. Links to my Amazon wishlist and Amazon UK wishlist are also down there. I want to give a shout out to Simon for sending this. I really appreciate it. I want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Stephen Crane, Colin Coney, and Finn Perkins. I appreciate their support as I do the support of all of my patrons. It does make a difference. And don't forget to click the like button as well. Most importantly, thank you for watching.